"Don't touch that wire," screamed the janitor's daughter. The tech mogul laughed in her face. What she revealed next left everyone speechless. Before we continue, please comment on which country you're watching from and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. The San Francisco skyline shimmered in the afternoon sun as Marcus Chun adjusted his designer glasses, standing confidently in the pristine server room of his company's flagship data center. At 38, he had built a technology empire worth $8 billion, revolutionizing cloud computing and artificial intelligence systems across 4 continents. Today's demonstration for potential investors represented more than a business presentation. It was a showcase of his visionary genius and technological dominance. Around him, a carefully selected group of venture capitalists, tech journalists, and industry leaders sipped artisanal coffee, their excited chatter echoing off the climate-controlled walls. The massive quantum server array, a $50 million custom installation, hummed with quiet power, its LED indicators pulsing in synchronized patterns that suggested infinite computational capability. Marcus's lead engineer, David Park, a Stanford PhD with 15 years of experience at top Silicon Valley firms, monitored the system displays with practiced precision. "Revolutionary doesn't even begin to describe it," called out Victoria Sterling, a prominent tech investor, adjusting her Cartier bracelet. "Your AI processing speeds are going to disrupt every industry simultaneously." Marcus smiled, accepting the praise with the effortless confidence of someone who had been called a genius since childhood. His security team, led by the imposing figure of James Rodriguez, maintained professional vigilance while scanning for any irregularities. The air carried the subtle ozone smell of high-powered electronics and the barely audible hum of cooling systems managing petabytes of data. As he approached the main control console to begin the demonstration, Marcus felt the familiar rush of validation. Today's presentation would showcase an AI system breakthrough that would cement his company's dominance for the next decade. It was another precisely calculated move designed to increase his valuation while positioning him as the visionary leader of the 4th Industrial Revolution. The processors hummed louder as initialization sequences began. Everything was perfect, exactly as Marcus Chun always demanded it to be. The first sign of disruption came as a small figure slipped through the data center's sophisticated access protocols. Elena Vasquez, a 13-year-old girl with messy black hair pulled into a practical ponytail and clothes from discount stores, somehow navigated past the biometric scanners and security checkpoints that protected the facility from unauthorized access. Her scuffed sneakers squeaked against the polished tile floors as she moved through corridors lined with equipment worth millions of dollars. Elena had been coming to this building for 4 months, ever since her father Miguel started working the night janitorial shift. With her mother back in Mexico caring for a sick grandmother, Elena spent evenings doing homework in service areas while her father cleaned. She possessed something that her circumstances had sharpened into an extraordinary ability: pattern recognition and systems thinking born from necessity. When you are the daughter of immigrants, understanding how complex systems work becomes essential for navigating a world that doesn't always make space for you. Earlier that day, while waiting for her father to finish his shift, Elena had overheard something that made her stomach churn with worry. She had been studying calculus in the equipment room when she witnessed 2 technicians arguing near the main power distribution panel, their voices carrying frustration and fear that seemed completely at odds with the facility's usual professional atmosphere. "I'm telling you, this surge suppressor's reading intermittent faults," the junior technician had said, his voice shaking with stress. "We need to shut down the quantum array until we can get replacement components. The power draw for today's demo could trigger a cascade failure." But his supervisor, a man whose Tesla key fob gleamed even in the equipment room's dim lighting, had dismissed the concern with an impatient gesture. "Mr. Chen's demonstration happens today. Period. The investors are already here, and we're talking about $1 billion valuation. Configure the backup systems and route around it. Patterson, or update your resume." Elena had watched from behind an equipment rack as Patterson reluctantly returned to his workstation, his shoulders slumped in defeat. She saw him attempt to reconfigure power distribution paths, but even from her hiding spot, Elena could see warning indicators on the monitoring screens. Her years of helping her father understand building systems, combined with her advanced placement physics coursework, told her that bypassing safety protocols under high load was dangerous, potentially catastrophically so. Now, as she pushed through the final security door leading to the server room, Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The sound of expensive voices discussing valuations and market disruption filled her ears. The group of elegantly dressed adults turned toward her with expressions ranging from surprise to irritation. "Security!" shouted James Rodriguez, immediately moving to intercept the young intruder. His hand instinctively moved toward his radio to call for backup. But Elena was driven by something more powerful than fear of authority. She had watched too many people in her community suffer because powerful people ignored warnings from those they considered beneath them. She had seen her own father dismissed by supervisors, managers, and clients who treated immigrant labor as invisible and voiceless. Tonight, she refused to be silent. "Don't start the demonstration," she screamed, her voice cutting through the technological hum with desperate urgency. "Please, the power systems aren't safe." Marcus Chen paused with his hand hovering over the initialization sequence, genuine surprise flickering across his features. He was accustomed to protests. Environmental activists occasionally targeted his facilities, and competitors sometimes employed dramatic tactics. But this was different. This was a child, alone and obviously desperate. The assembled guests began murmuring among themselves, some reaching for their phones to document what they assumed would be an entertaining security breach. Victoria Sterling clutched her designer handbag tighter, stepping backward as if poverty might somehow contaminate her. "Get her out of here," Marcus commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built an empire through decisive action. "I don't know how she breached our security, but this is completely unacceptable. David, continue the initialization sequence." James Rodriguez approached Elena with professional efficiency, his movements designed to remove the threat without causing a scene that might embarrass his employer. But Elena stood her ground, her small frame trembling not with fear, but with desperate determination. "The surge suppressor is failing," she yelled, pointing at the power distribution panel. "I heard the technicians arguing. Patterson said the power draw from your demonstration could cause a cascade failure. He wanted to shut down the system, but his supervisor made him bypass the safety protocols." Marcus's expression shifted from mild annoyance to outright derision as he processed Elena's words. The idea that this janitor's daughter could possess knowledge about advanced power distribution systems that his team of Stanford and MIT engineers had missed struck him as not just absurd, but personally insulting. He threw back his head and laughed, a sound that carried across the server room like a declaration of his intellectual superiority. "Did you hear that, everyone?" Marcus called out to his guests, his voice dripping with amusement. "This child thinks she understands quantum computing power systems better than my team of doctorate-level engineers." The assembled crowd joined in his laughter, their carefully cultivated sophistication momentarily giving way to cruel amusement. Victoria Sterling tittered behind her manicured hand. "Oh, Marcus, where do these people get such ideas? As if a janitor's daughter would understand anything about high-performance computing infrastructure." David Park, the lead engineer, emerged from his monitoring station and approached the group. His face showed professional concern, but not about the power systems, about the security breach and potential PR implications. "Mr. Chun, I've been monitoring all systems continuously. Every parameter is within normal operational range. We're cleared for full demonstration." Elena's eyes filled with tears of frustration, but she refused to back down. Her life in the margins had taught her that adults rarely listen to children, especially the children of cleaning staff. But she had also learned that persistence sometimes broke through indifference. "I'm not lying. I saw the warning indicators on the monitoring screens. Patterson, the technician, he looked terrified. He said the surge suppressor has intermittent faults, but his boss made him reconfigure the backup systems to bypass it. He said your demonstration's power draw could trigger everything. Patterson. Marcus's eyebrows raised with theatrical disbelief. You know the names of our night shift technicians? This is getting more entertaining by the minute. He turned to James Rodriguez. Get facility security on the radio. I want to know how a child managed to infiltrate our secure data center and apparently spy on our technical staff. James nodded and spoke quietly into his earpiece, requesting a full security review and background check on all janitorial staff. Meanwhile, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. From her position near the power distribution panel, she could see status indicators that the adults seemed too focused on their social performance to notice. 3 warning lights were flashing amber, a pattern she recognized from helping her father troubleshoot building electrical systems. There are warning lights on the power panel, she pointed frantically. Look, 3 amber indicators in sequence. That means the system is already operating outside normal parameters. But her words were lost in the group's continued conversation. Marcus had begun entertaining his investors with stories of other times protesters and activists had tried to disrupt his operations, treating Elena's desperate warnings as cocktail party entertainment. Dr. Sarah Chun, no relation to Marcus, a systems safety consultant who specialized in high-performance computing infrastructure, had been quietly observing the interaction from the back of the group. Unlike the others, she noticed the specificity of Elena's technical language and the genuine terror in her voice. Marcus, she said carefully, what if we just take a moment to verify? Sarah, please, Marcus interrupted with an indulgent smile. I appreciate your professional caution, but we can't let every delusional staff child dictate our demonstration schedules. I have investors here who have flown in from 3 continents. Every minute of delay costs money and credibility. Elena felt desperation clawing at her throat. She had learned through bitter experience that adults often dismiss children's observations, but she had never encountered stakes this high. In her years helping her father understand complex building systems, she had developed an almost photographic memory for indicator patterns and system behaviors. Understanding how infrastructure worked often meant the difference between her father keeping his job and their family losing their only source of income. The amber lights are in sequence, she shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. That's the pre-failure warning pattern. When you activate the quantum array at full power, the surge suppressor won't be able to handle the load, and the backup routing Patterson configured isn't rated for those power levels. The whole power distribution system could. Enough. Marcus's voice cut through her explanation with the finality of a judge's gavel. James, remove her immediately, and I want a full investigation into how our security protocols failed today. And get Miguel Vasquez in here. I want to know why his daughter has been wandering around my facility unsupervised. As James approached, Elena made one final desperate attempt to reach someone, anyone, who might listen. She locked eyes with David Park, the lead engineer, knowing that his technical training would make him most likely to understand the implications of what she had witnessed. Mr. Engineer, please, she pleaded. Just check the surge suppressor logs. Please. 5 minutes could prevent a disaster that could damage millions of dollars of equipment, or worse, hurt people. David hesitated for just a moment, something in the child's voice giving him pause. But Marcus's impatient gesture toward the control console reminded him of his priorities. His career depended on making this demonstration successful, not indulging the paranoid warnings of staff children. The tension in the server room reached a breaking point as James Rodriguez moved toward Elena with practiced efficiency. His years of corporate security training had taught him to handle disruptions swiftly and quietly, minimizing embarrassment for his clients. But as he reached for Elena's arm, something unexpected happened that would change the trajectory of everyone's afternoon. Dr. Sarachin stepped forward, her professional instincts overriding social protocol. Wait, she said firmly, raising her hand toward James. Just wait one moment. She had spent 2 decades consulting on high-performance computing safety, and everything about Elena's demeanor suggested genuine technical knowledge rather than attention-seeking behavior. The specific terminology, the understanding of indicator patterns, the knowledge of power distribution hierarchies. These weren't things a child would fabricate. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Victoria Sterling hissed, clearly uncomfortable with any delay to their carefully orchestrated presentation. "We can't encourage this kind of disruption. Next thing you know, every staff member's child will think they can interrupt million-dollar demonstrations." But Dr. Chun ignored the social pressure, walking over to Elena's position. Her voice became professional and focused. "Elena, is that your name? I need you to tell me exactly what you saw and heard, step by step, and I need you to show me which indicators you're talking about." Elena's eyes widened with surprise. For the first time since entering the server room, an adult was actually listening to her and treating her as a credible technical observer rather than a disruptive nuisance. The simple act of being taken seriously unleashed a flood of detailed observations that had been building pressure in her chest. "I was studying in the equipment room around noon today," Elena began, her words tumbling out rapidly. "I do my homework there while waiting for my dad to finish his shift. I heard two technicians working on the power distribution systems. The younger one, Patterson, he was really worried about something in the surge suppressor diagnostics." David Park, despite his earlier dismissal, found himself listening more carefully. Professional engineers were trained to pay attention to technical concerns, even when they came from unexpected sources. "What specifically did you hear him say?" he asked, his tone shifting from skepticism to professional inquiry. "He said the surge suppressor was reading intermittent faults, and they needed to replace components before running any high-load demonstrations," Elena continued, encouraged by the engineer's attention. "But the other man, the one with the Tesla keys, he said Mr. Chen's demonstration had to happen today no matter what. He told Patterson to configure the backup power, routing to bypass the problematic suppressor." Marcus's expression began to shift from amusement to irritation. The idea that his technical staff might be taking shortcuts or discussing security concerns with unauthorized personnel represented a serious management problem. Even if this child actually overheard some conversation, she clearly misunderstood what she heard. "My engineering team follows the highest industry standards. We have redundant safety systems specifically designed to prevent any possibility of—" But Elena wasn't finished. Her years of helping her father understand complex building systems had taught her to notice patterns that others missed. Patterson tried to explain that the backup routing wasn't rated for the quantum array's peak power draw. He kept saying something about thermal load capacity and cascade failure risk. He looked scared, really scared. And then his supervisor said something about insurance covering equipment damage and that Mr. Chen's valuation was more important than Patterson's paranoia. Dr. Chen noticed that Elena's description included specific technical details that would be difficult for a teenager to fabricate. "Elena, how do you know about power distribution systems and thermal load capacities?" For the first time since entering the server room, Elena's desperate expression softened slightly with something like pride. "My dad is a janitor, but he's also an electrical engineer. In Mexico, he designed power systems for hospitals and universities. Here his degree doesn't count, so he cleans buildings. But he still teaches me everything he knows. He says understanding systems is how you survive in a world that doesn't always value your credentials." This revelation created an uncomfortable silence among the assembled guests. The idea that the janitor cleaning their floors possessed advanced technical education challenged their assumptions about labor, immigration, and meritocracy. Victoria Sterling shifted nervously, suddenly aware that her dismissive attitude might have been premature. David Park felt his professional training kicking in despite his reluctance to challenge his employer. "Mr. Chun, it might be worth taking a quick look at the surge suppressor logs. A diagnostic check would only take a few minutes, and if there's any possibility of a power distribution issue—" "Absolutely not," Marcus snapped, his patience finally exhausted. "I will not have my demonstration disrupted by the paranoid fantasies of a janitor's daughter. My engineering team has protocols, certifications, and insurance specifically to prevent this kind of nonsense." David, initialize the demonstration sequence. Now, but Dr. Chun had noticed something else during her conversation with Elena. The child's body language suggested she was holding back additional information, and her eyes kept darting toward the power distribution panel. Elena, is there something else you haven't told us? Elena's eyes moved from the panel to the assembled adults, then back again. She was clearly wrestling with whether to reveal something that might be even harder for them to believe. After Patterson finished the reconfiguration, I saw him in the break room. He was on his phone, and I heard him leaving a voicemail for someone, maybe a supervisor or safety inspector. He said, "If something goes wrong during today's demo, I want it on record that I reported the surge suppressor faults and was ordered to bypass safety protocols." Marcus Chen's face flushed with anger at this revelation. The suggestion that his staff was creating documentation of safety concerns behind his back represented insubordination that couldn't be tolerated. But before he could respond, Dr. Chen made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "I could check the surge suppressor logs remotely," she offered quietly. "I have the credentials and training. If Elena's wrong, we'll know in 60 seconds and can proceed. If she's right, we'll have prevented a potentially catastrophic equipment failure, or worse." "Sarah, what are you doing?" Marcus's voice carried a note of betrayal. His safety consultant was supposed to be providing credibility to his demonstration, not entertaining the warnings of children. "Marcus, with respect, if there's even a small possibility of a power system issue, it's my professional obligation to investigate. Better to look foolish than negligent." Dr. Chun was already moving toward a monitoring terminal, pulling out her tablet to access system diagnostics. The group stood in tense silence as they waited for her to review the logs. The quantum array continued its initialization sequence, and the air carried the increasing hum of power systems preparing for high-load operation. Marcus checked his platinum smartwatch repeatedly, clearly calculating how much this delay was costing him in terms of investor confidence and media narrative. Dr. Chen remained focused on her tablet, quietly pulling up diagnostic data and power distribution logs. Elena stood nearby, still trembling, but now with a flicker of hope that someone was finally taking her warning seriously. "You know," Dr. Chen said thoughtfully while scanning the data, "in safety engineering, we have a concept called weak signal detection. It's the ability to identify early warning signs that others miss because they're too invested in the planned outcome. Children who grow up in complex, uncertain environments often develop heightened sensitivity to these weak signals because their safety depends on reading situations accurately." Victoria Sterling looked uncomfortable with this professional analysis. "Surely you're not suggesting we should base our safety decisions on the observations of teenagers with no formal credentials?" "I'm suggesting that we shouldn't automatically dismiss technical information based on its source," Dr. Chen replied firmly, still scanning her tablet, "particularly when that information comes from someone whose family's livelihood depends on understanding complex building systems." David Park found himself caught between professional protocol and growing unease. His engineering training emphasized multiple verification systems precisely because single points of failure could be catastrophic. While he had complete confidence in his team's work, Elena's detailed description of specific safety concerns was beginning to penetrate his certainty. "Mr. Chun," he said carefully, "even if the probability is low, the consequences of a power distribution failure during a full-load quantum demonstration would be—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implications. Marcus's frustration reached a boiling point. "This is absolutely ridiculous. We're allowing a janitor's daughter to halt a demonstration that represents months of engineering work and millions of dollars in investment based on completely unverified claims about conversations she supposedly overheard. Do you have any idea what this delay is costing in terms of—" "Marcus, shut up," Dr. Chen said quietly, her eyes still locked on her tablet screen. The casual profanity from the normally professional consultant created instant silence. "Elena, you said Patterson mentioned intermittent faults in the surge suppressor?" "Yes, ma'am. He said the diagnostics were showing intermittent faults, which meant the component was failing, but not failed yet. He said that made it more dangerous, because it might work fine under normal load, but fail catastrophically under high-power draw. Dr. Chen's face had gone pale as she scrolled through the diagnostic logs. "Marcus, we have a problem. A serious problem." The room's atmosphere shifted instantly from irritation to alarm. Marcus moved quickly to look over Dr. Chen's shoulder at the tablet display, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. "The surge suppressor has been logging intermittent fault codes for the past 72 hours, Dr. Chen said, her voice tight with professional concern. "And according to these logs, someone, presumably Patterson, reconfigured the backup power routing at 10:47 this morning. The backup routing is designed for normal operational loads, not quantum array demonstration power draws." David Park immediately stepped forward, his engineering instincts overriding any employment considerations. He took the tablet from Dr. Chun and examined the data under the harsh LED lighting. His face grew progressively more concerned as he analyzed the configuration changes. "This backup routing configuration would work fine under standard conditions," David said, his voice carrying the weight of professional alarm. "But under full demonstration load, the thermal capacity would be exceeded within approximately 90 seconds. The resulting cascade could damage the entire quantum array and potentially cause electrical fires in the power distribution infrastructure." He looked directly at Marcus, his expression grave. "Sir, if we had activated the demonstration sequence, we would have been looking at equipment damage in the tens of millions of dollars and significant risk to personnel safety." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus Chun, a man who had built his fortune on being the smartest person in any room, found himself confronting the reality that his entire company had nearly been put at risk by schedule pressure and dismissal of warnings from someone he considered beneath notice. Dr. Chun broke the silence with a question that cut to the heart of the afternoon's moral complexity. "Marcus, what would have happened if Elena hadn't been here today?" The answer was obvious to everyone present, but Marcus struggled to voice it. His entire identity was built on the premise that education, expertise, and technological sophistication provided protection from amateur mistakes. The idea that his company's safety had depended on the intervention of a 13-year-old janitor's daughter was profoundly destabilizing. "I need to make some calls," Marcus said finally, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "James, I want a full investigation into how this power system issue occurred and why it wasn't caught in our normal review protocols. David, shut down the demonstration sequence and get our senior power systems engineers in here immediately." As the adults began discussing practical matters, rescheduling the demonstration, investigating the safety failures, notifying investors, Elena found herself forgotten once again. The pattern was familiar from her life in the margins. Adults would acknowledge her presence when they needed something from her, then fade her back into invisibility once the immediate crisis passed. But Dr. Chen noticed Elena's gradual withdrawal from the group's attention. "Elena, you can't just disappear. What you did today was extraordinary, but you're still a 13-year-old who deserves recognition for potentially saving lives and preventing massive equipment damage." "I'll be fine," Elena replied automatically, the response she had given to every well-meaning adult who had expressed concern over the years. "I need to get back to the equipment room before my dad finishes his shift. He doesn't know I came in here." The tragedy of this statement was not lost on Dr. Chun, who specialized in organizational safety culture and human factors. Here was a child who had demonstrated observational skills and technical knowledge that exceeded the performance of multiple doctorate-level engineers, yet she expected to simply return to doing homework in equipment rooms while her father cleaned floors. Marcus, overhearing this exchange, felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Throughout his business career, he had prided himself on identifying and leveraging exceptional talent regardless of its source. Elena had just demonstrated technical acumen, systems thinking, and moral courage that exceeded anything he had seen from his highly paid professional staff. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying a different tone than before, You said your father is an electrical engineer who works as a janitor? Yes, sir. He designed power systems for major institutions in Mexico, but his credentials don't transfer here. So he cleans buildings to support our family, while my mother cares for my grandmother back home. And he's been teaching you electrical engineering and systems analysis? Yes, sir. Since I was 8. He says that education is the one thing nobody can take away from you, even if they don't recognize your credentials. He teaches me everything: power distribution, thermodynamics, systems integration, failure analysis. He says I need to understand how the world works if I'm going to change my place in it. As the afternoon's events began to settle into a new reality, Marcus Chun found himself grappling with questions that had never occurred to him during his meteoric rise to technological dominance. Standing in his state-of-the-art data center, surrounded by his usual circle of credentialed professionals, he was confronted with the stark contrast between Elena's genuine competence and their collective failure to recognize a potentially catastrophic danger. Dr. Chun, Marcus said quietly, stepping away from the main group, in your professional opinion, what happens to talent like Elena's in the current system? Dr. Chen's expression grew somber as she considered a response. The statistics are grim, Marcus. Children of immigrant workers face extraordinary barriers, regardless of their capabilities. Without the right credentials, connections, or institutional pathways, exceptional ability often goes completely unrecognized. They become invisible, serving your coffee, cleaning your offices, fixing your equipment, while possessing knowledge and skills that could revolutionize industries. But she clearly has exceptional abilities, Marcus protested, gesturing toward Elena, who was now sitting quietly on a storage container, watching the adults discuss her future as if she weren't present. Her systems analysis, her technical knowledge, these aren't things you pick up casually. Actually, they are, Dr. Chin corrected gently. Children who grow up bridging cultural and linguistic divides while watching their educated parents work menial jobs often develop remarkable analytical skills. But those same skills are rarely recognized or valued by conventional institutions. Universities don't have admission categories for grew up translating complex technical concepts between Spanish and English while helping immigrant parents understand American systems. David Park, who had been coordinating with the senior engineering team to properly address the power system vulnerabilities, rejoined the conversation. If I may, he interjected, what this girl demonstrated today goes beyond general intelligence. She identified a specific technical vulnerability that our entire engineering team missed. That requires legitimate education combined with exceptional observational skills. For my father, Elena said quietly, having overheard the discussion. He started teaching me when I was in elementary school. He said that in America, credentials matter more than knowledge, so I needed to be undeniably competent. He said that people like us have to be twice as good to be seen as half as valuable. Victoria Sterling, who had been conspicuously quiet since the discovery of the power system problems, finally spoke up. Well, surely there must be programs or scholarships that could help someone with her situation. Aren't there initiatives for gifted students from disadvantaged backgrounds? Dr. Chen's laugh carried no humor. Victoria, the best STEM scholarship programs in the Bay Area receive thousands of applications for dozens of spots. Even exceptional students from underrepresented communities face enormous competition, and most of those programs prioritize students who already have strong institutional support. Elite high schools, competitive exam scores, extracurricular achievement records. A 13-year-old doing homework in equipment rooms while her father cleans offices doesn't fit their selection criteria, regardless of her actual capabilities. That's unacceptable, Marcus said, his analytical mind automatically beginning to examine the systemic failures that had created Elena's circumstances. There must be solutions. Resources properly allocated should be able to address these problems. Resources help, Dr. Chen agreed. But the issues are more complex than simple funding. These young people need mentorship, credential pathways, professional networks, cultural navigation support. a comprehensive web of opportunities that very few organizations are equipped to provide. Elena stood up from her makeshift seat, clearly preparing to leave. Her experience had taught her that adults often made grand pronouncements about helping during moments of crisis, but follow-through was rare. "Thank you for listening to me today," she said formally. "I'm glad the system didn't fail. I should get back before my dad worries about where I am." "Wait," Marcus called out, surprising himself with the urgency in his voice. "Elena, where does your family live? What high school will you be attending?" Elena shrugged with the practiced nonchalance of someone accustomed to limitations. "We're in South San Francisco. I go to Lincoln High. It's okay. Not like the private schools here in Palo Alto, but it's fine. My teachers are nice, even if the classes move kind of slow." The casual acceptance of this educational inequality created another uncomfortable silence among the assembled adults. Here was a 13-year-old with doctorate-level systems analysis skills, attending an underfunded public school, accepting limited opportunities as an inevitable circumstance rather than an addressable problem. James Rodriguez, who had been quietly coordinating security arrangements and documentation of the afternoon's events, stepped forward. "Mr. Chun, if I may make a suggestion, we have educational partnership programs with several institutions. It would be straightforward to arrange enrichment opportunities while we figure out longer-term pathways." Marcus nodded gratefully, recognizing that his security director was offering a practical entry point to address an immediate problem. "Yes, of course. Elena, would you be willing to participate in some advanced technical training programs? We could arrange transportation, cover any costs, coordinate with your school schedule." But Elena's experience with well-intentioned offers had taught her to be cautious. "I don't want charity," she said firmly. "If I participate, I want it to be because I've earned it. I want to contribute something real, not just be somebody's diversity project." Dr. Chen smiled, recognizing the fierce independence and self-respect that characterized many immigrant families. "What if it weren't charity? What if it were an opportunity, one where your contributions would actually help us improve our systems?" "What do you mean?" Elena asked, her natural skepticism warring with cautious hope. Marcus felt pieces of an idea beginning to coalesce in his mind. His technology empire had been built on identifying systemic inefficiencies and creating innovative solutions to address them. "Elena, you demonstrated today that you possess rare systems analysis capabilities combined with technical knowledge. What if those abilities could be properly developed and applied to real-world problems?" "Applied how?" Elena's question carried the wariness of someone who had learned that adult offers often came with hidden conditions or unrealistic expectations. "I don't know yet," Marcus admitted honestly, "but I've built my career on recognizing capability gaps and creating programs to address them. What I saw today suggests you have skills that go far beyond what conventional education might measure or develop." David Park nodded in agreement. "In engineering, we have internship and mentorship programs that combine hands-on project work with formal education. Students learn by working alongside experienced professionals while advancing their academic credentials. Could something like that work for Elena?" Dr. Chen asked, her professional interest clearly engaged. "It could," David replied thoughtfully, "but it would require significant commitment from mentoring professionals, partner educational institutions, and the student herself. It's not something you could improvise or approach casually." Marcus's mind was now fully engaged with the challenge, approaching it with the same analytical intensity he brought to complex business problems. What would be required specifically? Educational support, obviously, but what else? Mentorship from professionals across multiple disciplines, Dr. Chen began. Coordination with her existing school to ensure she doesn't fall behind in standard requirements. Possibly psychological support to help manage the pressure of participating in adult professional environments. Transportation logistics. Legal arrangements with her parents. It's a comprehensive undertaking. "And expensive," Victoria Sterling added, though her tone suggested curiosity rather than criticism. "Expensive compared to what?" Marcus asked. Compared to the cost of allowing exceptional talent to be wasted? Compared to the societal costs of maintaining systems that fail to recognize capability? Compared to what this company would have lost if Elena hadn't spoken up today? Elena listened to this conversation with growing amazement. These adults were discussing her future with a level of seriousness and specificity that she had never experienced. More importantly, they were talking about developing her abilities rather than simply managing her circumstances. "Mr. Chun," she said quietly, "why would you want to help me? You don't know anything about me except what happened today." Marcus considered the question carefully. "Elena, today you risked embarrassment and punishment to warn strangers about a danger we couldn't see. You demonstrated technical knowledge that potentially saved millions of dollars in equipment and prevented possible injuries. You showed more professional integrity and competence than some of my highest-paid engineers. Those aren't random qualities. They're indicators of exceptional character and capability." "But I'm nobody," Elena protested. "I'm just a janitor's daughter who happened to overhear something and understood what it meant. That's not special." Dr. Chen shook her head firmly. "Elena, what you did today wasn't luck or coincidence. It was skill, knowledge, and moral courage. Those are exactly the qualities that successful professionals cultivate and value." The next morning dawned with an unusual sense of possibility hanging over the San Francisco Bay. Elena woke up in her family's small apartment, the morning sun filtering through windows that overlooked a parking lot rather than the sprawling campuses of tech giants. For a moment, she wondered if the previous day had been an elaborate daydream, but the business card from Marcus Chun on her nightstand and the detailed email outlining proposed educational opportunities confirmed the surreal reality of her situation. When she arrived at her school that afternoon, having been excused from morning classes for a meeting, she found herself in a conference room at Chintech headquarters. Marcus was seated at a glass table surrounded by laptops, educational consultants, and coffee cups that suggested he had been working since dawn. Dr. Chun was present as well, along with several other adults Elena didn't recognize, professionals whose presence suggested that yesterday's conversations had evolved into concrete planning. "Good afternoon, Elena," Marcus said, looking up from a thick folder of documents. "I hope your morning classes went well. We've been working on some ideas we'd like to discuss with you and your father. Is he able to join us?" Elena's father, Miguel Vasquez, entered the room a moment later, looking uncomfortable in his custodial uniform, but carrying himself with quiet dignity. Marcus stood and extended his hand with genuine respect. "Mr. Vasquez, thank you for joining us. Your daughter potentially saved this company from a catastrophic equipment failure yesterday. We'd like to discuss how we might support her educational development." Miguel shook Marcus's hand, his expression a mixture of pride and protective skepticism. "My daughter told me what happened. I am very proud of her, but I want to understand what you are proposing and what you expect from her." Marcus gestured to seats at the table. "Of course. That's exactly why we wanted to meet with both of you. Please sit down." As Elena and Miguel settled into chairs, Marcus introduced the other people at the table. "This is Dr. Jennifer Park, an educational consultant who specializes in advanced STEM programs. That's Robert Martinez, who runs technical mentorship initiatives for exceptional students. And this is Stephen Walsh, an education attorney who helps arrange program agreements and credential pathways." Each professional nodded politely, but Elena noticed that their expressions carried genuine interest rather than the patronizing sympathy she had grown accustomed to receiving from well-meaning teachers and counselors. "Mr. Vasquez, Elena," Dr. Park began, "we've been reviewing Elena's academic records from Lincoln High, and we've conducted some preliminary assessments based on her technical knowledge demonstrated yesterday. Her spatial reasoning, systems analysis, and technical comprehension scores are all in the 98th to 99th percentile." Miguel's face showed pride but not surprise. "My daughter is very intelligent. This I have always known. In Mexico, I would have many opportunities to support her education. Here it is more difficult." "That's what we want to address," Marcus said. We're proposing a comprehensive program that would supplement Elena's regular education with advanced technical training and professional mentorship. What does this mean specifically? Miguel asked, his protective instincts demanding concrete details rather than vague promises. What would Elena do? What would you expect? What would be the cost to our family? Robert Martinez opened his laptop and turned the screen so Miguel and Elena could both see. We've developed partnerships between technical companies and educational institutions. Students split their time between hands-on project work and advanced coursework. The goal is to develop both practical skills and academic credentials. Elena is only 13, Miguel pointed out. She has regular school responsibilities. How would this work with her existing education? Dr. Park explained. We would coordinate with Lincoln High to ensure Elena stays on track with all standard requirements. The advanced program would supplement, not replace, her regular coursework. We're looking at approximately 10 hours per week, weekend sessions, and occasional afternoon projects during school breaks. And the cost? Miguel asked, his jaw tight with the pride of a man who had always supported his family despite enormous obstacles. No cost to your family, Marcus said simply. This is an investment in talent development. We cover all program expenses, transportation, materials, any associated costs. Miguel's expression remained skeptical. Mr. Chun, in my experience, when wealthy people offer expensive things for free, they are usually expectations or conditions that are not immediately obvious. What is it that you really want for my daughter? The directness of this question seemed to resonate with Marcus more than diplomatic pleasantries would have. Mr. Vasquez, that's a fair question. Here's what I want. I want your daughter to develop her exceptional abilities to their full potential. I want her to have opportunities that match her capabilities rather than her circumstances. And yes, selfishly, I want my company to benefit from her contributions as she develops those skills. This isn't pure charity. It's recognition of exceptional talent combined with mutual benefit. Miguel considered this answer carefully. And if Elena decides this program is not right for her, if she wants to stop, then she stops, Dr. Chen interjected. This is an opportunity, not an obligation. Our goal is to support her development, not trap her in a program that doesn't serve her interests. Elena, who had been quietly listening to the adults discuss her future, finally spoke up. Papa, I want to do this. I want to learn more than what I can learn just from you and from my school. I want to understand systems at the level where I can actually build things, not just analyze them. Miguel looked at his daughter with an expression that mixed pride with protective concern. Mija, you understand that this would be very demanding? You would be working with adults, being held to professional standards. It would not be easy. Nothing about our life has been easy, Papa, Elena replied quietly. But you always taught me that difficulty is not the same as impossibility. You taught me that intelligence and hard work can overcome circumstances, but only if you have opportunities to apply them. 6 months later, Elena found herself standing in a cutting-edge machine learning laboratory, wearing a company badge that identified her as a technical development associate, a title that Marcus's team had created specifically for students in the mentorship program. The transformation in her confidence was remarkable. Regular engagement with professional engineers and access to advanced resources had revealed the exceptional analytical mind that had been developing quietly while she did homework in equipment rooms. All right, Elena, said Dr. Lisa Wong, her AI systems instructor. Today we're going to analyze why this neural network is producing inconsistent classification results. What's your initial diagnostic approach? Elena approached the complex display of model architecture and training data with the same methodical attention she had once applied to understanding power distribution diagrams with her father. But now, instead of survival skills, she was applying her pattern recognition capabilities to problems that required mathematical sophistication, computational thinking, and creative problem-solving. The model's accuracy is high on training data but degrades significantly on validation data, she said, analyzing performance metrics with practiced efficiency. That suggests overfitting. The model is memorizing training examples rather than learning generalizable patterns. Dr. Wong nodded approvingly. Elena's progress over the past 6 months had exceeded everyone's optimistic projections. Her combination of systems thinking and rapid technical learning had proven to be a powerful formula for advanced STEM education. Good analysis. What's your proposed solution? Implement regularization techniques to prevent overfitting, Elena replied, already pulling up documentation for different approaches. Either drop out layers to randomly disable neurons during training, or L2 regularization to penalize large weights. We could also expand the training dataset to give the model more diverse examples to learn from. As she worked, Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that day in the data center. The structured learning opportunities, the professional mentorship, the access to resources, all of these represented opportunities she had once thought were permanently beyond her reach. But more importantly, she was discovering intellectual horizons she had never known existed. The educational program that Marcus and his team had designed was unlike anything offered by conventional institutions. Rather than forcing her to conform to rigid academic structures, it had been built around her specific learning style and capabilities. Technical challenges served as vehicles for teaching advanced mathematics, computer science, physics, and engineering principles. Writing and communication skills emerged from documenting her project work and presenting findings to professional audiences. Excellent work, Dr. Wong said as Elena successfully implemented regularization techniques that improve model performance. You're ready for the next phase, contributing to actual product development projects. What's the next phase? Elena asked, carefully documenting her work with the precision her father had taught her. Real-world application. Mr. Chun has arranged for you to join a team working on infrastructure monitoring systems. You'll be observing, learning, and contributing to actual problem-solving that will be deployed in production environments. This news filled Elena with excitement and nervousness in equal measure. For months, she had been developing her skills in controlled learning environments. The prospect of contributing to products that actual users would depend on represented both an opportunity and a test of everything she had learned. That evening, during her regular session with Dr. Chun, which had become part of the comprehensive support program, Elena discussed her mixed feelings about the upcoming transition. I'm excited about working on real projects, she said, sitting in the comfortable chair that had become her usual spot in Dr. Chen's office. But I'm also scared. What if my contributions aren't actually valuable? What if I'm just there as a token, and everyone is just being nice because I'm part of this special program? Dr. Chen smiled, recognizing the imposter syndrome that often affected high-achieving students from underrepresented backgrounds. Elena, do you remember what happened 6 months ago in the data center? I warned everyone about the power system failure. And what was the response? Elena thought back to that afternoon. Most people didn't take me seriously. Mr. Chen laughed at me. Everyone dismissed me except you and eventually Mr. Park. Exactly. And why did I start taking you seriously? Because I had specific technical knowledge that was relevant to the problem. Right. Not because I felt sorry for you. Not because I wanted to be encouraging. But because you demonstrated actual competence. That's the standard you will be held to on the product development team. Your contributions will be valued based on their merit, not on sympathy or tokenism. Can you accept that? Elena considered this carefully. I think so. It's actually kind of reassuring. I don't want special treatment. I want to know that when I contribute something, it matters because it's genuinely useful. That's the attitude that will serve you well, Dr. Chen replied. And remember, asking for help or admitting when you don't understand something isn't weakness. It's essential to professional growth. Over the following months, as Elena began contributing to real product development, she discovered that her analytical abilities had applications far beyond the specific technical skills she had been developing. At an infrastructure monitoring project, she noticed patterns in sensor data that suggested hardware installation errors were being misinterpreted as environmental anomalies. Her analysis helped the team redesign their installation protocols, improving data quality across hundreds of deployments. At a machine learning project focused on predictive maintenance, she identified biases in training data that were causing the model to systematically underpredict failures in certain equipment categories. Her insight led to a complete revision of the data collection methodology, significantly improving the system's real-world performance. At a cloud infrastructure optimization initiative, she observed that resource allocation algorithms were creating inefficiencies during certain usage patterns. Her proposed modifications reduced operating costs by 8% across the entire service infrastructure. Each success built Elena's confidence, while also revealing the broader applications of her system's thinking capabilities. She wasn't just writing code or analyzing data. She was identifying systemic inefficiencies and creating solutions that generated real value. But perhaps the most significant transformation was in how professional engineers and product managers responded to her contributions. Unlike her experience as an invisible janitor's daughter, she now found herself in meetings where senior technical staff genuinely sought her input on challenging problems and valued her analytical perspective. "Elena," said Michelle Kim, the lead engineer on the infrastructure monitoring project, "I've been doing this work for 15 years, and I've rarely seen someone pick up systems analysis as naturally as you do. Have you thought about what you want to focus on for university and career development?" The question would have seemed impossible a year ago. "I think I want to focus on socio-technical systems," Elena replied thoughtfully. "Not just the technology itself, but how technical systems interact with human systems, especially how they can either reinforce or reduce inequalities." Michelle nodded with interest. "That's sophisticated thinking for someone your age. What sparked that interest?" Elena thought about her father cleaning floors while possessing expertise that could design hospital power systems. She thought about the engineers who had dismissed her warnings because they couldn't imagine a janitor's daughter understanding their systems. She thought about all the capable people rendered invisible by circumstances beyond their control. "Personal experience," she said simply. 2 years after the data center incident, Elena stood before a packed auditorium at Stanford University, preparing to deliver a presentation that would have seemed incomprehensible during her life before the mentorship program. She wore professional attire that fit her properly, and her posture projected confidence earned through demonstrated competence rather than social performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Dr. Richard Foster, chair of Stanford's Computer Science Department, "I'm pleased to introduce Elena Vasquez, who will be presenting her research on bias detection in infrastructure monitoring systems." As Elena approached the podium, she caught sight of Marcus Chun in the audience, his expression radiating satisfaction. Beside him sat Dr. Sarah Chun, Dr. Wong, Robert Martinez, and several other mentors who had contributed to her development. But perhaps more importantly, she noticed her father Miguel in the back row, wearing his best suit rather than his custodial uniform, his face showing pride that needed no translation. "Thank you, Dr. Foster," Elena began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. 2 years ago, I was a 13-year-old doing homework in equipment rooms while my father cleaned offices. Today I'm here to discuss research that could improve how technical systems serve diverse populations and prevent systematic blind spots in critical infrastructure." She clicked to her first slide, which showed a photograph of the data center from that pivotal day. This presentation begins with a question. How can we design systems that recognize signals and patterns that don't fit expected profiles? My research suggests that the answer lies not just in better algorithms, but in diversifying who builds and monitors those systems. For the next 40 minutes, Elena presented findings that had emerged from her work across multiple projects at Chintech. She had documented patterns of how homogeneous engineering teams created systematic blind spots in their products, assumptions built into algorithms, monitoring systems optimized for expected patterns while missing anomalies, user interfaces designed for specific user profiles while creating barriers for others. Traditional engineering approaches emphasize efficiency and optimization, she explained, displaying data that showed performance impacts of various design choices. But our research indicates that optimization for expected use cases often creates systematic failures for edge cases, and those edge cases often represent vulnerable populations or critical safety scenarios. Her presentation included case studies from each of her project experiences, demonstrating how diverse perspectives and lived experiences could identify problems that traditional engineering approaches systematically missed. The key insight, Elena continued, is that effective systems design requires both technical expertise and what we might call lived experience diversity, the ability to recognize patterns and problems that might not be visible from positions of privilege or conventional professional backgrounds. During the question and answer session, Elena fielded inquiries from computer science professors, industry professionals, and graduate students with the same confidence she had once applied to analyzing power distribution systems. Ms. Vasquez asked a senior researcher from Google, "Your research suggests that engineering teams with experiential diversity produce more robust systems than teams selected purely for technical credentials. How would you operationalize that insight in hiring and team composition?" Elena's response drew on both her technical education and her lived experience with systems that failed to recognize capability. The challenge isn't identifying capable people. Exceptional talent exists across all demographics and backgrounds. The challenge is creating recruitment and development pathways that recognize capability regardless of how it's been credentialed or where it's been developed. After the presentation, as the auditorium emptied and audience members approached to continue conversations, Marcus found himself reflecting on the afternoon's broader implications. What had begun as a spontaneous decision to listen to a desperate child had evolved into something far more significant, a demonstration that exceptional human potential existed everywhere, but was recognized only rarely. "Marcus," Dr. Chen said, joining him as he watched Elena engage in technical discussions with graduate students and industry professionals, "you realize what you've demonstrated here goes far beyond helping one talented student." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew her answer. "You've created a model for identifying and developing human potential that completely bypasses traditional credentialing systems. Elena's success demonstrates that intelligence, analytical ability, and systems thinking exist across all demographics. We just haven't developed recognition and development pathways that aren't dependent on zip codes, family resources, or institutional access." Marcus nodded, his entrepreneurial mind already exploring the implications. The talent shortage problem that every tech company faces. Maybe it's not actually about scarcity. Maybe it's about recognition systems that are too narrow and development pathways that are too exclusive. "Exactly," Dr. Chen agreed. "How many other children like Elena are out there right now, doing homework in equipment rooms, translating for immigrant parents, navigating complex systems while their capabilities go completely unrecognized?" This question had been haunting Marcus for months as he witnessed Elena's remarkable development. Her success raised uncomfortable questions about all the potential that was being wasted due to circumstance, institutional barriers, and systematic blind spots. "Dr. Chun," he said quietly, "what would it take to scale this approach? To create systematic pathways for identifying and developing exceptional ability regardless of someone's background or credentials?" Dr. Chen smiled, recognizing that Marcus's thinking was evolving from individual mentorship toward systemic change. It would require reimagining how we think about talent identification, educational pathways, and professional development. But based on what we've seen with Elena, the potential returns could be extraordinary, both for individuals and for organizations desperate for exceptional talent. As the afternoon concluded and the various groups began to disperse, Elena approached Marcus with an expression that combined gratitude with something deeper, a sense of shared purpose that had emerged from their unlikely collaboration. "Mr. Chun," she said, "I've been thinking about what comes next. My research has identified problems that go far beyond engineering and technology." "What kinds of problems?" Marcus asked, intrigued by the serious tone in her voice. The same systems failures that made me invisible, that make my father's expertise invisible, that make thousands of capable people invisible, are creating massive inefficiencies across the economy. But now I understand something I didn't understand 2 years ago. I have capabilities that could be applied to solving those systemic problems. Marcus felt a surge of excitement as he recognized that Elena was beginning to see herself not as a beneficiary of mentorship, but as an agent of systemic change. What are you proposing? I want to create talent identification and development programs that recognize capability regardless of how it's been credentialed. Programs that find the next generation of problem solvers in equipment rooms, in immigrant communities, in underfunded schools, everywhere that conventional recruitment systems don't look. Dr. Chun, who had been listening to this conversation, felt profound satisfaction as she witnessed the completion of Elena's transformation from invisible child to visionary advocate. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice filled with admiration and anticipation, "I think you've just identified our next initiative." 5 years after that transformative afternoon in the data center, Elena stood before a TED conference in Vancouver, preparing to address thousands of attendees about a challenge that most preferred to ignore. At 18, she had become the youngest keynote speaker in TED's history, but her presence there represented far more than a symbolic gesture. The auditorium buzzed with conversations of entrepreneurs, educators, and policymakers from over 80 countries. In the front row, Marcus Chun sat beside Miguel Vasquez, both watching with pride as Elena prepared to deliver the most important speech of her life. Behind them, dozens of young people who had graduated from the program Elena had helped create filled an entire section. Former invisible students who had been transformed into engineers, researchers, entrepreneurs, and innovators. "Distinguished guests," Elena began, her voice carrying across the vast hall with absolute authority. 5 years ago, I was an invisible child whose greatest achievement was understanding complex systems well enough to warn adults about dangers they couldn't see. Today I stand before you as the founder of the Capability Recognition Initiative, which has identified and developed exceptional abilities in over 5,000 young people worldwide. The screen behind her showed a map dotted with locations where her programs had been implemented: San Francisco, Sao Paulo, Detroit, Nairobi, Manila, and dozens of other cities where invisible talent had been transformed into visible contribution. "But I'm not here to celebrate past successes," Elena continued, her tone shifting to urgency. "I'm here to issue a challenge that will determine whether we waste or develop the most valuable resource in the innovation economy, unrecognized human capability." She clicked to a slide showing stark statistics. Millions of young people whose abilities would never be recognized because they didn't fit conventional selection criteria. Countless adults whose expertise was rendered invisible by credential barriers or demographic assumptions. Massive talent shortages in critical industries, while capable people remain systematically overlooked. Every day, we discard human capability because we cannot see past surface credentials. Every day, we allow exceptional minds to remain invisible while simultaneously complaining about talent shortages. This is not just morally unacceptable, it is strategically catastrophic. The audience stirred as Elena's presentation shifted from statistics to specific examples. She introduced, via video, several young people whose stories paralleled her own. A former foster youth who had become a cybersecurity expert after someone recognized her pattern recognition skills, a refugee who had developed water purification technologies after someone invested in his chemistry knowledge, a learning disabled student who had created breakthrough accessibility software after someone looked past standardized test scores to recognize her system's thinking. These individuals were not rescued by charity, Elena emphasized, her voice rising with conviction. They were empowered through systematic recognition of capabilities that existed all along. The difference between wasted potential and transformative contribution is not genetics or luck. It is recognition opportunity. She paused, allowing the weight of this statement to settle across the audience. Today, I am announcing the launch of a $500 million initiative to create global infrastructure for capability recognition and development. regardless of credentials, demographics, or background. This initiative, funded by a coalition of technology companies, educational institutions, and foundations, will establish recognition and development pathways in 100 cities worldwide within the next 3 years. The announcement triggered excited murmuring throughout the auditorium. The scope of what Elena was proposing represented a fundamental challenge to how societies approach talent identification and human capital development. But funding is not enough, Elena continued, her voice cutting through the noise. Success requires a fundamental shift in how we perceive and recognize human capability. We must stop seeing lack of credentials as evidence of lack of ability. We must start recognizing that exceptional capabilities often develop precisely because of challenging circumstances, not in spite of them. She clicked to her final slide, which showed a simple image: a janitor pushing a cleaning cart through a high-tech facility, accompanied by text that read, "What genius are you walking past every day?" 5 years ago, I was an invisible child who prevented a catastrophic equipment failure by having the courage to speak up when adults weren't listening. That incident saved millions of dollars. But more importantly, it demonstrated that capability and insight can come from most unexpected places. The question facing all of us today is simple: will we learn to recognize it? The standing ovation that followed Elena's presentation lasted for nearly 8 minutes, with attendees from industries and nations that rarely aligned united in their recognition of both her personal achievement and the broader vision she had articulated. As the applause finally subsided, Elena found herself surrounded by CEOs, university presidents, and foundation directors eager to discuss implementation strategies. But in the midst of this high-level excitement, Elena's attention was drawn to a small group of young people who had been volunteering at the conference. Teenagers whose worn clothes and uncertain expressions reminded her of her own appearance 5 years ago. Without hesitation, she excused herself from the circle of influential leaders and made her way toward these unlikely participants. "How did you get access to TED?" she asked gently, recognizing the complex navigation required for economically marginalized youth to participate in elite conferences. "We're part of the volunteer program," replied a boy who couldn't have been more than 15. "We heard someone who started like us was speaking, and we wanted to see if it was real, if someone like us could actually make it to a stage like this." Elena smiled, remembering her own skepticism toward adult promises during her years of invisibility. "It's real," she said simply. "And more importantly, you're real. You have capabilities that the world needs, even if nobody has recognized them yet." Over the following hour, as conference attendees conducted their formal networking, Elena spent her time with these young people, listening to their stories and explaining how her recognition programs worked. She saw in their faces the same mixture of intelligence, resilience, and invisible potential that she had once possessed. Dr. Chun, watching from a distance, felt a profound sense of completion as she observed this interaction. Elena's transformation from invisible child to global advocate was remarkable, but perhaps more significant was her instinctive understanding that success meant creating recognition for others, not just achieving personal advancement. As the day concluded and the various participants prepared to return to their respective countries and organizations, Marcus approached Elena with an expression that combined entrepreneurial satisfaction with personal pride. "Elena," he said, "5 years ago, you saved my company by noticing something everyone else missed. Today, you may have saved thousands of careers by getting the world to notice something it has been systematically overlooking." Elena shook her head, her characteristic humility still intact, despite her extraordinary achievements. "Mr. Chun, I didn't save your company. You saved my future by choosing to listen. And today isn't about saving careers. It's about recognizing that they exist in the first place." The capability recognition initiative that Elena launched at TED would go on to become one of the most successful talent development programs in the technology sector, identifying and developing exceptional abilities in overlooked populations across 6 continents. But its true success would be measured not in statistics or funding levels, but in the countless individual stories of recognition, Young people whose capabilities had been identified, developed, and applied to solving critical challenges. Every day, extraordinary capability walks past us, disguised as ordinary circumstances. Children with brilliant minds sit in underfunded classrooms. Teenagers with revolutionary ideas navigate systems that see only their limitations. Young adults with the capability to transform industries work jobs that never ask what they could contribute if someone simply recognized what they could do. The story you've just read isn't fiction. It's a template. Across every community, in every city, there are young people whose capabilities could revolutionize businesses, solve pressing problems, and drive innovation. If someone would simply take the time to look beyond surface credentials and invest in developing what's already there. You don't need to be a tech billionaire to change a life. You don't need to create a global foundation to make a difference. You need to do what Marcus Chin did in that data center. Listen when others dismiss. Invest when others overlook. And believe in capability when others see only credentials. Contact your local schools, community organizations, and youth programs. Volunteer your expertise. Share your professional networks. Or simply pay attention to the young people whose voices are being systematically ignored. Because somewhere in your community, the next Elena is waiting for someone to hear her when she says, "I can help." The question isn't whether exceptional capability exists around you. It's whether you'll recognize it when it speaks.